Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Brittnee. Today's video is another chocolate tempering method. I've had a handful of people ask if you can use cocoa butter to temper chocolate, and the answer is you can. One way is to use something called cocoa butter silk, but today's video isn't about cocoa butter silk. That's a whole process all on its own, and I'll probably make a video about it later on. But the other way to temper chocolate with cocoa butter is with a product called Mycryo. Mycryo and cocoa butter silk are similar because they are both fully tempered forms of cocoa butter, but one is smooth and creamy and the other is a powder. Mycryo is a product made by Callebaut, and it's basically pure freeze-dried cocoa butter that already contains all the stable beta crystals that you're looking for when you're tempering chocolate. Now, before we get into the tempering process, if you don't yet know what chocolate tempering is, I suggest that you watch this video where I explain more about what tempering is and why you need to do it. But just for a quick summary, chocolate contains a fat called cocoa butter, and cocoa butter is polymorphic, which means that depending on how it's handled, its crystal structure can change. So to get our desired result of shiny, uniform, and snappy chocolate, we have to handle it a specific way that develops the most stable cocoa butter crystals within the chocolate. And we do that through the process of tempering. So let's get into how to temper chocolate using Mycryo. So in case you're wondering, you can use Mycryo to temper any kind of chocolate: white, milk, dark, ruby, or even caramel. The temperatures are a little bit different, but the process is the same for all of them. And I'll put the temperatures for each type of chocolate down in the description for you guys. Today, I'm going to temper milk chocolate to demonstrate. So your first step is to weigh out your chocolate. Now, I'm not tempering this chocolate to use for anything, just for this demonstration. So I'm just going to do a pound. Notice that I'm using leftover chocolate that I've tempered and used before, and that's totally fine for this method. When I heat up this chocolate, it's basically going to reset it, and then the Mycryo is going to add in and help develop stable crystals. Okay. Next, I measure out 1% of the weight of my milk chocolate in Mycryo cocoa butter. So 1 pound is 16 ounces, and 1% of 16 is 0.16 ounces. And that's just a weird measurement, so I'm actually going to convert everything to grams and pull out my micro scale. So 16 ounces is 453.5 grams, and 1% of 453.5 is 4.535 grams. All right, so we've measured everything out. Next step is to melt the chocolate to between 40 and 45 degrees Celsius. I'm going to do this in the microwave for about 30 seconds at a time on high, stirring in between. The closer it gets to the 45, the less time I'll do in the microwave. So I'll go down to like 15 seconds or 10. So this is after 60 seconds in the microwave. I did 30 first and then stirred it, and then I did 30 more. And now I'm stirring it. So I'll put it in for 30 seconds more. So this is after 90 seconds total. I'll give it another stir, and it's basically all melted, but we need to get it to above 40 degrees. Something I forgot to mention is that you want to use a microwave safe plastic or like polypropylene bowl. You don't want to use glass because glass retains heat, and that can keep your chocolate warmer longer, or it can even burn your chocolate during the melting process. So something to keep in mind. At this point, we'll start measuring the temperature. And it's only at 36 degrees Celsius, so I'm going to pop it in the microwave, but it warms up quick now that it's all melted, so I'm going to just do 10 seconds. Okay. Now it's teetering between like 39 and 40 on the dot. So probably go just 7 more seconds. Okay, I actually went 9 seconds in case you want the specifics. Because the range is 40 to 45, I like to shoot for 43. And it's 43.8. Great, we're still under 45, but over 40, so that's good. Now we let the chocolate cool down to 34 degrees Celsius, and on the Callebaut website it says let it cool at ambient temperature. So I'm not going to speed this part up with an ice bath or anything. Just leave it in the bowl and stir it occasionally to keep the chocolate moving. But I'm just going to use the cool room temperature to cool down the chocolate. So while we wait for the chocolate to cool down, I just want to talk a little bit more about my experience using Mycryo to temper chocolate and just talk about some pros and cons. So let's start with the pros. I think this method is really fast. The process itself feels really fast. It's also really simple and it's really hard to mess up. It's very straightforward and easy to do. It also works well with small or large quantities of chocolate. Normally, chocolate is a little bit easier to temper in larger amounts, especially with the seeding method or even the tabling method. And that's because the more chocolate you have, the more stable the temperatures are. They're not changing really quickly, heating up really quickly or cooling down really quickly, which can sometimes mess with temper. But with this method, because you're just adding stable crystals into the chocolate, it works well with even small quantities. So that's a benefit. Another pro is that it sets up really fast. Now we know tempered chocolate sets up fast. This way of tempering the chocolate sets up so fast, I've found, which can be a pro or a con, depending on your project. Now let's get into the cons. The first one for me is that it adds extra cost to your chocolate. And this may not be the biggest deal because you're only adding 1% of the weight of your chocolate, which isn't a very large quantity, so the money isn't going to add up quickly. But if you consistently use this method and you're tempering a lot of chocolate, you are adding more cost into your chocolate for kind of no reason, because it's not necessary. You can temper chocolate other ways with just your chocolate. So you're adding an unnecessary cost into tempering chocolate. And cocoa butter isn't cheap. I did do some pricing research and it doesn't seem like Mycryo is more expensive than regular cocoa butter, but it is expensive, just like cocoa butter. It's about like $20 per pound. So once again, that kind of goes along with the first con of you're adding extra cost into your chocolate where you don't need to. And like I mentioned with the pros, it sets up really fast. And for me, that hasn't always been a good thing. If I'm just doing like a sheet of chocolate for something, or if I'm testing something, it's really fast and easy to use this method and it sets up really fast, which is not a problem. But I found that when I use this method of tempering for shelling or capping bonbons, it actually gets very frustrating because it sets up too thick. And you know that if your chocolate starts to thicken while you're molding bonbons, it gets really hard. Either your shell ends up too thick when you're shelling, or if you're capping, that's even worse because it starts to thicken and you can't get a clean scrape. And then if there are pieces that are setting up harder than others, you're actually like scraping bits out of your chocolates, and that can be really frustrating. So I wouldn't personally recommend this method for molded chocolates, but of course you can always try it out yourself and see what you think. Another con that you kind of can prevent, but you have to be careful about, is that it can leave little bumps in your chocolate because it doesn't always dissolve properly. I think it should, but in my experience, it doesn't always. Because it's a powder, when you stir it in, you have to be really careful that it's all dissolving and getting incorporated in your chocolate. So just something to think about. And then the last con is that you're adding extra cocoa butter into your chocolate. And I know it's just a small amount and it's probably not a huge deal and probably doesn't even make a difference, but over time, if you're reusing leftover chocolate and you continue to use this method, you're adding more and more and more cocoa butter, and that's actually changing the formulation and the ratio of fat in your chocolate. I don't think this is a huge deal because it's such a small amount, 1%, but I just wanted to mention it in case it could make a difference. All right, those are my pros and cons. And with all that being said, my preferred uses for tempering chocolate with Mycryo are when I'm in a hurry or when I'm tempering a small amount of chocolate for a quick project. And those are basically the only times I use this method. So my chocolate is getting close to 34 degrees. And I just realized, because I'm only using a pound of chocolate, it's pretty shallow in this bigger bowl. So it's going to be hard to blend. So I'm just moving it to a little bit smaller bowl. That will make things a little easier. Smaller bowl requires a smaller spatula. Okay, so let's measure the temperature again. And it's important you add this at 34 degrees because it needs to be warm enough to melt this and incorporate it. So the first way we're going to prevent those little clumps I was talking about is to push it through a sieve. That'll get rid of a lot of them from the beginning. So just quickly do this. Oh, and by the way, my chocolate was at 34 degrees. So, so I'm adding this in now. I'm going to just quickly push it through. I want to work fast so that my chocolate doesn't keep cooling. So this will break up the little clumps that form in the container of the Mycryo. This will give it a good start. Now I just incorporate that well by stirring it in. So you add the Mycryo at 34 to 35 degrees. For milk chocolate, I do 34. I only do 35 for dark chocolate. And you're not going to be able to see on the camera because they're so tiny, but you can still see the little powders right now. Now, before this cools down too much, the second way I'm going to try to get rid of those little tiny powder clumps is with the stick blender. So I'm just going to give a quick run through with that. Okay, and that really does the job. So like you can use Mycryo without blending it, but you might have little tiny powders. This really is the only way I can fully get them broken down. And kind of wish I would have tried a little harder to show on the camera the tiny, tiny, tiny little lumps. They're so small, like you wouldn't notice them really, but I can tell once I blended it. It's super smooth now. So let's take the temperature. The temperature says 32.2. So it needs to cool down to working temperature. And for milk chocolate, that's usually between 30 to 31, 29 to 30. So I'll probably wait till it reaches around 30, and then we'll do a temper test. And remember, when you're learning about tempering, that movement also helps develop those stable crystals. So I'm not just going to leave the chocolate to sit here. I'm going to stir it a little bit as it cools down. You don't have to stir it continuously. I'm going to stir it a little bit, and I'll leave it here for a second while I clean up, and then I'll give it another stir, and then we'll check the temperature. Chocolate is probably close to 30. It looks like it says 29.6, 30, 29.7. So it's ready for our temper test. I'll do a temper test. So basically the temper test, if you're not familiar, is that I'm putting a thin amount of chocolate here on this offset spatula, and it should only take a couple minutes to start setting up. So I'm just going to take this, set it aside. So as you can see, it starts off really shiny because the chocolate is like melted chocolate. So it's a liquid, and it will start to get dull and firm, and it will have a little sheen, but it will mostly be matte looking. And for milk chocolate, it should set up within like 7 minutes, but my guess is it'll set up a lot quicker because of this tempering method. So I'm going to start a timer and we'll see how long it takes. All right, so check it out. It's only been 4.5 minutes about. It's already getting dull. Yeah, no chocolate on my finger. It's set up. So chocolate takes 24 hours to fully set up, but you'll still be able to get a nice snap before that, especially if you pop it into the fridge so it can contract from the mold or off of parchment paper or acetate or anything. So just within the 5-minute temper test, it's not going to get super firm, but this is exactly what it should look like. If it wasn't tempered properly, it would still be liquid after 5 minutes, and it would get on your finger. So you can see it's matte, nothing is coming off. If you scrape it, you can see that it's set up. So it looks great. And don't forget that any leftover tempered chocolate that you have, you can just spread onto a piece of parchment paper. It'll set up. You can leave it out at room temperature, or you can pop it in the fridge if you're in a hurry, but just let it set up. And then you'll break it into small pieces to reuse. And just a reminder, or if you don't know, every time you use chocolate, it has to be retempered. Okay, so even though this is tempered, you can't just gently melt it to working temperature. It needs to be fully retempered. You can do that with the Mycryo method. You can do it with the seeding method. It's best when seeding to just use brand new chocolate right from the bag from the manufacturer for the seeds, but you can, for the main pot of melted chocolate, you can use leftover chocolate like this, and that'll work just great. You can also use the tabling method with leftover chocolate. You can not use the microwave method. Well, you can. I've done it before. The chances of success are lower because when we temper chocolate, sometimes we over temper it a little bit and sometimes we under temper it. Even though it's tempered and it works well and everything, it can still be over or under tempered. So because the microwave method isn't very precise, it's not like a great place to start when you're using leftover. Okay. All right, guys, that's how you temper chocolate using Mycryo cocoa butter. I hope that you liked the video and that you learned something new. If you did, please let me know by liking the video and leaving me a comment down below. It helps me out a lot. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, today's the day. If you'd like to see something else that's sweet, just click on one of these thumbnails. Thanks so much for watching today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.